Welcome. We'll start with a short message from the Rector's Professor Antonella Polimeni, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very sorry I cannot be with you in person today due to other institutional commitments, but I'm truly pleased to send my warm greetings to all of you gathered this afternoon in our Aula Magna for this special event. It is a great honor for Sapienza University of Rome to welcome Dr. Richard Stallman, a pioneering figure whose vision has profoundly shaped the history of computer science and digital culture. By launching the free software movement and developing the GNU operating system, Dr. Stallman has changed the way we think about technology, openness, and the freedom to share and create knowledge. Today he will deliver a lecture entitled Free, Libre, Software and Freedom in the Digital Society. In his talk, Dr. Stallman will address some of the most pressing challenges to individual and collective freedom in our digital world, from non-free software and mass surveillance to censorship restrictions on sharing and growing dependence on proprietary web services. This event has been organized and promoted by our students' representatives in collaboration with the Department of Computer Science and with the full support of our university. The collaboration between students, faculty, and institution perfectly embodies our shared commitment to openness, participation, and ethical innovation. I would like to warmly thank Professor Leonardo Guerzoni, Pro-Rector for Digital Technologies and Cybersecurity, Professor Enrico Tronci, Director of the Department of Computer Science, and Professor Andrea Venturi, who coordinated this initiative, for their commitment in promoting this event open to the entire Sapienza community. The presence of Dr. Stallman offers us an extraordinary opportunity to reflect on the relationship between knowledge, freedom, and the responsibility in the digital era. I wish you all a stimulating and inspiring discussion and a very successful event. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, dear colleagues and students. As Deputy Rector for ICT Systems and Cybersecurity, it's a pleasure and honor on behalf of Sapienza University of Rome to welcome you all to this event. At Sapienza, freedom is not only a constitutional right, it is the cornerstone of our academic mission. Freedom of research and teaching allows knowledge to advance through openness, dialogue, and critical inquiry. Is what enables actually our community to explore new ideas, to quest assumptions, and to share discoveries for the benefit of all. In our times, the exercise of this academic freedom is inseparable from the digital dimension. The tools through which we create, access, and distribute knowledge must themselves reflect the same principles of transparency, openness, and autonomy that guide our research and education. Defending these values in the digital sphere means protecting the integrity of knowledge itself and ensuring that technology remains a means of emancipation rather than limitation. With this understanding of freedom as both a right and a responsibility essential to the life of our university, Sapienza is honored to welcome Richard Stallman and to host his distinguished lecture. Before I yield the floor to my colleague, Professor Daniele Venturi, who will introduce the lecture, I would also like to thank the student representatives, the Department of Computer Science, and all the offices that worked hard on a short time frame to make this lecture possible in this wonderful Aula Magna. Thank you all for being here today and enjoy this event.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So let me start by thanking again all the people at the computer science department that helped me to actually make this event reality. And I mean, I'm really happy to actually know that this event started and came from the students. Okay, I think this is really awesome. Okay, and so some revolutions start with words, and the one that we are talking about today started with code instead. So let's welcome Richard, and the floor is all yours.
I'm going to start by presenting a 14-minute video that explains the basic ideas of free software and the free software movement in the clearest way I've ever done it. So take it away. So, now comes the live portion of my presentation, which will be followed by around an hour of questions and answers. And to prepare for that, people have handed out pieces of paper. Maybe they were handed out at the ends of the rows and you need to pass them along for other people. The point is, you're getting these pieces of paper because I want you to write your questions. I have hearing problems and this room is noisy. It's hard for me to hear anyone in here. If you were speaking to me, even using a microphone, I would often have to ask you to repeat again and again. It's time wasting and it's inefficient. I wouldn't be able to answer many questions that way. I'm much better at reading. Be careful to write clearly, and I'll be able to read most of the questions and answer them immediately. You can hand in questions whenever there's somebody to take them from you, and I'll just get them in a stack and do question after question after question. You'll be amazed at how efficiently that works. So, I would like to ask this university to do two things. First of all, have workshops, advanced classes, and year-long projects, perhaps whatever works, in reverse engineering. Reverse engineering is crucial for figuring out how to liberate various secret pieces of hardware. And it's also a skill in considerable demand in business. There are not many people who do this. Training good reverse engineers is very useful. So I hope the professors here will take that to heart and find a way to do that. But there's something else that affects all of you, and that is most universities nowadays pressure or require their students to run non-free software, and that is an injustice. The university must stop asking you to run non-free software. Stop asking the staff and faculty to run non-free software. The university shouldn't ever tell you what software to run. And it should make sure that the jobs it asks you to do can be done with free software. Many people give in to the pressure to run non-free software but the university must avoid adding to that pressure. People who come here happily using free software must not be told you've got to allow some non-free, unjust software into your computer to talk to the university. So, you've probably heard of copyleft and the GNU General Public License, but a lot of people don't have a clear idea of what that's all about. A free license is defined by allowing people the 4 freedoms. So if you're using a program and its license is free, you have the freedom to run it, to study and change it, to redistribute it, and to distribute modified versions. But there are various ways to allow that. And there's a secondary question which isn't mentioned in the definition of free software, and that is, when people distribute modified versions, do those modified versions have to be free software also? And that's because it varies. There are free programs that permit people to make proprietary modified versions and distribute those and subjugate people. And there are also the free licenses which don't allow that, which say if you distribute modified versions, they have to be free also. So you can't use a modification of our software to subjugate other people. Those licenses are called copyleft licenses. That's what copyleft is. It's the idea that you are free to distribute modified versions combined with other stuff or whatever, provided the whole thing is free software in the same way. So this way, we use the power that copyright gives us, but instead of using it to subjugate users, we use it to defend freedom for everyone. And the idea is that this way we get more free software, users' freedom is respected by more organizations and more people, and thus ultimately we reach freedom, we reach a free society. So I hope you will choose copyleft licenses for the free programs you make and release. There are, however, some situations where there's a good reason to use a non-copyleft license, a morally valid reason. So I suggest you take a look at gnu.org/licenses/license recommendations.html. And that will give suggestions about what license to use for what kinds of works, including when it's important to insist on copyleft and when it's better for society to use a lax license. These are so hard to turn that they sometimes hurt my hands, but they don't hurt my teeth, at least not yet. Copyleft is a general idea. It's implemented by various specific licenses, in particular the GNU General Public License, or GNU GPL. You have heard a lot of people talking about so-called artificial intelligence, and most of the time they're mistaken. Most of the time they're talking about programs which are not capable of intelligence at all. What does intelligence mean? It means the ability to know and understand things. And the programs like ChatGPT, the large language models, they don't know or understand anything. They generate text, and they don't understand the meaning of this text because they don't understand meanings at all. All they know is what's coherent with most of the things people say in terms of word patterns, but they don't know what any of those word patterns actually means. So it would be more accurate to call them artificial stupidity or bullshit generators. The philosophical definition of bullshit is utterances generated with inattention to the truth. In other words, no effort is being made to think about whether the statements are true. And in the case of bullshit generators, they don't do it because they are unable to do it. They have no ability to know the truth of anything. So it's a serious social problem that so many people mistakenly believe that those things are intelligent. And why do they believe that? Because of an enormous marketing hype campaign which uses the term artificial intelligence. So we ought to resist that campaign, and instead of repeating the hype marketing slogan that the campaign uses, we should make sure people can see that they are not intelligent. I'm very careful never to refer to bullshit generators as intelligence. Now, there are real artificial intelligence systems today which can know and understand things within a limited domain. But they don't involve generating text or anything like that. Those systems are not intelligent. But consider, for instance, medical systems. There are systems that can look at a picture of some tissue and judge whether that tissue is cancerous. And they're not perfect, but they're as good as the most capable humans. That's about as well as could be done. So I think it's fair to call them intelligent. And many of these systems are trained to recognize a distinction visually or orally or whatever. So some analog medium that is hard to draw precise conclusions about, but a person who's trained can have good judgment. And these systems are trained to have equally good judgment. The point is, we should be careful to use the term artificial intelligence only for systems that understand something that they're working on. And we should not use the term intelligence. We should resist the term intelligence when it's foolishly applied to other kinds of things like ChatGPT. This misunderstanding is widespread, and it leads millions of people to expect that any day now those systems will not only be intelligent, but as intelligent as humans. And they're not even taking the first step on the path. And you'll note that their frequent, gross, horrible errors, blatant errors, are referred to as, quote, hallucinations, unquote. That is also part of the hype campaign. In order to hallucinate, you must be capable of perceiving. If you can't perceive anything, you can't hallucinate. If you have no idea what's true or not, then outputting false statements is not a hallucination. It's simply a reflection of the fact that you don't know anything and can't know anything. So, enough about that. I want to talk about a fundamental question that affects free and non-free software, which is, can you trust your computing? The video explained how if you're running a program and it's free software, there is a user community which has the ability to study and correct that program. And that gives you a basis to trust that program. Now, that doesn't mean it's perfectly error-free. I don't know if anything can be done that's perfectly error-free, but it's a reason for trust. Whereas with proprietary software, you have no reason to trust it. We know that the companies that develop proprietary software frequently intentionally try to screw their users, mistreat them in a long list of ways. I suggest you look at gnu.org/malware for a list of hundreds of instances of non-free programs which are malware, meaning they're designed to mistreat their users. And this is intentionally. Bugs are a different thing. Nobody's perfect, so we all make mistakes in programming. Everybody's programs will have bugs sometimes. That's not malware, because an error is not a matter of bad faith. But intentionally mistreating users is bad faith, and that is what we document in gnu.org/malware. And each instance has a reference to the press to document it. And they're classified by the different kinds of malicious functionalities. For instance, surveillance, backdoors, refusing to execute certain commands, tricking users in various ways, restricting users intentionally so that something users want to do, there is no way to do, it's impossible. Stopping users from sharing copies. So you'll get an introduction to the range of different malicious functionalities found in non-free software today. And what we found is that non-free software is generally malware. Someone studied, I think it was the 1,000 most popular Android apps, and found that of the paid Android apps, something like 60% did surveillance. Whereas with the gratis Android apps, 90% did surveillance. But this study was limited to one particular method of surveillance because they could check for that looking at the downloaded binary. There are other ways to do surveillance, but in order to detect them, you'd have to be much cleverer. So maybe they're all doing surveillance, but the person doing this study had no way to tell. But person was able to study one kind of surveillance, and the result was most of the programs did it. It has simply become a standard practice that the developers of non-free software generally do. The people who write these non-free apps, they don't work for the organizations whose website it is, because their field is not programming generally. So they hire some company, and the company puts in the surveillance and mistreatment it always puts in, and it may not, but even the organization's people, it might never occur to them that there's anything wrong with this, because they know it's being done to them all the time. We need to reestablish the idea that anyone developing software that you're supposed to end up using treats you with respect and treats your freedom with respect, because it's not acceptable to fail to do that. So this includes the apps for various Snoop phones, and it also includes the JavaScript software that many websites send to the user, and unless you let those programs run, the site may not work at all. It happens to me fairly often that there are articles I want to read on the web and I can't access them because they have non-free JavaScript code. My browser blocks non-free JavaScript code, and without running that, nothing is visible. Now, sometimes this is for an intentional malicious purpose, like it might be it might be a paywall, or it might require users to identify themselves. It's wrong to require users to identify themselves. That's unjust. And I won't look at a site that does that. If I want to see the article, it says, "Who are you?" I just kill that tab. Because they have no right to know who I am. But sometimes it isn't even a malicious purpose. It's just something that they thought was useful to do, and they happened to do it with non-free JavaScript code because that's the usual way. And thousands of other sites are doing it that way, so they do it too. And sometimes, if they wanted to bother, they could fix that problem, but it doesn't occur to them because not enough people say to them, "You shouldn't be demanding I entrust your site with power over my computer or power to snoop on me." So it's a matter of changing society's standards of what is right and what is wrong. Now, what makes reasons to trust your computing? When you're doing the computing on your own computer, if the software is free, then you have a basis to trust it. That's a reason for trust. And that's because you know other users can check what that program does, and if they find something nasty, they'll release a modified version that doesn't do the nasty thing. But you also may do your computing on servers set up by others. However, when you use those servers for your own computing, that's a terrible mistake, because you can never control what someone else's server is doing. Now, that server might be running entirely free software, but those copies belong to the server owner, not to you. So if you were running your copy of that program, that free program, you could trust it, because you could change it if needed. But if you're using someone else's server and someone else is running a free program, well, someone else can change it if it shows a bug, but you can't change it. The server owner has no reason to trust you to change the programs running in per server, and no obligation to. So the way we deal with this is, when it's time to do your own computing, do it with your copy of the free program on your machine, and that way you can change it. So doing the way to take advantage of the freedom and trust that free software makes possible is do the computing with your copy on a machine where you control the software that runs, where you could install a modified version. And when someone says, my server makes a convenient way to do this computing job, you're just going to have to trust me to control what happens, that's a reason to say no. We refer to this kind of practice if you as service as a software substitute. There's something you could do by running a program, that is, by using software. But someone says, use our convenient server instead. And that means you give up the opportunity to control what's being done. Now, what does security mean? Companies generally mean making sure they have control of things. If the company distributes non-free software, what that company really means when it says security is making sure that no one else can interfere with the company's control over what the programs do, even what those programs do on your computers. So that's what, but security for you means that you have control of your computing. So these two definitions in practice conflict. Microsoft says it wants to have control over its software even when it's running on your computer. But if you value your freedom, you'll say, no, I should have control over the program running on my computer. So who's supposed to have control of that program? Is it you or is it Microsoft? Well, this difference in the meaning of security turns out to be fundamental to understanding any question about security. I picked Microsoft as an example, but Apple does the same nasty thing, and lots of other companies do too. And nowadays, even hardware companies are making backdoors so that you can't trust the computers you're using. Intel, around 2007 or so, started putting a backdoor into its processors. It's called the management engine, which is like another processor which the user can't ever control. Only Intel can control it, or maybe some special organizations that get special privileges from Intel. So the management engine, when it runs, will only run non-free software signed by Intel. Users can't install software in it. And that software has, the processor has a separate Ethernet interface that so the management engine can talk to Intel, even if the main processor is switched off at the time. So it's a backdoor, and it's a backdoor that there is no way to get rid of. Now, for the latest generations of Intel processors, people have found a way to turn off the management engine after the machine finishes booting. But that's too late, because as the machine is booting, before it reaches the point where it's possible to switch off the management engine, the management engine can be installing booby traps and spy devices elsewhere in the system. So you can't really trust an Intel processor with that kind of backdoor. Sad to say, AMD's processors have a different backdoor in the hardware. It seems that there is a big current of desire in hardware manufacturers to screw users this way. I think it should be illegal. I think if someone sells you a computer or a processor or whatever, it should have to include complete specs so that you can verify there's no backdoor waiting to spy on you and trick you. But there are also injustices on the World Wide Web and on the internet more generally. Many websites snoop on people, sometimes in very sophisticated ways. For instance, there is browser fingerprinting, which is something that websites do by sending JavaScript programs to the user's browser. And the program contains a lot of benchmarks. A benchmark is a program that's artificially written just to measure how fast an operation is. So it will do the operation 1,000 times or 10,000 times or however much it takes to get a good measurement of how fast the operation is. And then just report. So it may send 100 benchmarks and get 100 numbers. And the thing is, any two computers are different in a way that is reproducible. So even if you and I have the same model of computer with the same model of processor, the fingerprint obtained from these benchmarks may be different, will surely be different somewhere between your computer and mine. And so there are various sites that benchmark every user that connects to them and get a picture of a fingerprint, a list of benchmark results. And so when sites cooperate, and there can be large numbers of sites cooperating for this fingerprinting, so when you visit one of these sites, the benchmarks get run in your machine, and all of the sites find out. So if you show up on any of those sites, it will know, that user has come back. That user was on that site, but now the user is on this site. And if any of the sites in this surveillance league know your name, they'll all know your name, because they're all spreading this surveillance data. So there are real dangers to surveillance through websites. Now, governments are getting into the act, attacking the possibility of releasing free software and making websites that don't run non-free software. It's becoming illegal in some places. For instance, it often ends up making all users identify themselves running non-free software to do it, or showing government ID to do it. Well, tracking people threatens freedom. We know which kind of governments always say, "Show us your papers, please." And if they do it through computers, it's no better. We also are aware that there's a tendency around the world towards increased repression of dissent and protest. And of course, the more websites start demanding to know who you are, the more tempting it is to use this to find dissidents and punish them. So if we want to have a free society, we need a powerful movement to demand the collection of less personal data about people, less tracking of people. The European Union's data protection regulations are inadequate, and you can even see that in the name data protection. The term data protection assumes that an organization has the data for some expected reason, and the question is to regulate what the organization does with the data. But what we need to go further than that. We need to make sure, we need regulations about collecting data or generating data. Otherwise, the GDPR will be ineffective because it's too easy to bypass that. I've seen systems, parking lot systems, that require every driver to enter the license number of the car into a computer system. Well, this is massive surveillance of people. Nominally, it's a way to collect fees for parking. But compared to that, the danger of what it's doing, tracking who parks there, is a much bigger problem than the problem it's meant to solve. Are you raising your hand for a reason? Someone, it looks like maybe not. My eyes are having problems. I'm going to need operations soon. And so it's much harder for me to see, and glasses don't help anymore. So, but the operation should fix that in a couple of months. Anyway, so basically, any regulations, if they are meant to prevent dangerous tracking of people, if they permit a parking lot system like that one, they're obviously far too weak and ineffective. And the next way to make users identify themselves is protection of children. You know, it's supposed to limit what children will be shown, but the inevitable side effect is that it forces adults to identify themselves. All the systems that they've proposed for adults to prove that they're adults have the effect of making it possible to identify them. And that is terribly dangerous. My response to that is that I won't use those websites at all. I don't, in general. I don't use anti-social media, partly because I don't want to be tracked, partly because, and you know, you have to say who you are. Of course, the site knows what you're looking at on the site, so right there, it's tracking you. With some sites, you can just make up a name. With some, they won't let you, like Facebook famously demands users give their real names, which means identify themselves. But now they have another excuse to make all the users identify themselves. The European Union is trying to prohibit products from offering end-to-end encryption. Now, if you want to do encryption, one of the fundamental rules about whether you can trust encryption is it must be free software. In particular, the actual encryption algorithm needs to be studied by lots of experts looking for some sort of trap in it, some secret way to decrypt things that only a few people know, and so they could read the supposedly secure messages you exchange. So basically, it's especially foolish to trust non-free software for encryption, but you've got to be able to choose which version you're going to run. If a website sends a program to your browser to do encryption and decryption, you can't trust that because you don't choose what code is going to run. If that company sends code that has a bug, it's not even even if you knew about the bug, it won't be easy to look at that company's site and use a modified version. So the thing to do is don't run encryption or decryption code that's sent to you over the web. Only run free software that you chose to install. So to prohibit end-to-end encryption, there's an effort to make it illegal in the European Union. It's known as chat control, and the idea is it should snoop on everybody's data before the encryption, which means the encryption is a joke. Google just announced a plan to restrict distribution of Android apps through methods other than Google. There is a free software app store called F-Droid, and I've looked at their criteria. Every app in F-Droid is required to be free software, and it's distributed as source code. You could build it yourself and install it if you want. But they offer binaries as well. F-Droid recently said that Google's new power grab would eliminate F-Droid. It wouldn't be able to function anymore. So what do we do when powerful companies attack our freedom in systematic ways? We need a powerful movement to fight back. And one way you can help make our movement more powerful is by joining the Free Software Foundation, which you can do at fsf.org, and you can pay your dues without running any non-free software. We went to the effort to set it up that way because it's against our principles to ask the public to run a non-free program. It would put us in a moral contradiction, so we made sure not to do it. And that's why it's important for you to organize here in the university and demand that the university stop requiring you to run a non-free program. Whether it's Microsoft Teams or Google Meet or Zoom, they're all evil and unjust in the same way. Or whether it's some sort of app for administrative dealings with the university, or some non-free software on your computer to take an exam. If a university wanted me to take an exam and tried to have me install the software on my computer, I would say that's insecure. I can't do that. But I would suggest that the university set up its computer with whatever software it wanted me to run, and then I would go and sit at the computer and type answers and thus I would take the exam, but I wouldn't be running that non-free software. In fact, the university's copy might be free software for the university. That, of course, if the people running the university are wise, they'll make sure that's true. But if it's non-free software, that's sad for the university. The university is losing some of its freedom to that program. But at least you won't be losing your freedom, because you won't be running that program. You'll just be supplying your answers to the university's kiosk. So, now it's time for questions. Have there any questions been collected? Good.
I would say let's start thanking Richard for the talk. Should I read the question?
No. I read the questions. That's the whole point.
Okay. But I mean, some
I want to be able to grasp them by reading, not by listening. How can I practically switch to free software for me and my family without them killing me? If your family is likely to kill you, you need to run away. Hey, what's wrong with those others? You just took away a stack of questions. Seriously, if your family is likely to kill you, you need to run away and maybe seek some safe place you could live. But, okay, we'll put the rest there. But basically, you've got to be able to explain the injustice of those programs and say that they're treating people, by demanding that you run those unjust programs, they're attacking your freedom. And say that you're sad that they have discarded their own freedom, but you have no say about that. That's their lives. If they want to allow companies to subjugate them, you have no right to stop them, but you're not going to do it to yourself. But you can also do this gradually. You know, you can say, I'm not going to run Zoom or any other non-free communication program now, so here are the ways you can contact me. Oh, and by the way, it's wrong to track other people. So I'm not going to carry anything that allows you always to find out where I am, or allows anybody to always find out where I am, because people shouldn't be able to do that to other people. What are your concerns about quantum computing being led by big tech company? Well, my concerns about quantum computing is that the main public key encryption algorithm, which is used, for instance, by the GNU Privacy Guard, which does it's used for public key encryption. Quantum computing is likely to make that algorithm useless because it will be able to factor large numbers very fast. So the question is, can we verify that a replacement is really solid? The issue is not that big companies have been involved, but rather that governments that you can't really trust, that would like to spy on everyone, have been involved. We have reason to believe that the RSA algorithm is reliable because nobody's been able to find a way to factor large numbers that fast enough that they could break it in the billions of years available in the life of the universe. But how would we know that for some new algorithm? How did it feel giving up something that could have turned out to be economically profitable, I'll say, to help the majority of people's freedom? Well, for me, it wasn't even a choice. I wanted freedom. You know, even if I were so vicious that I would take away other people's freedom, the fact is, by using non-free software, I was giving up my own freedom. And I did appreciate freedom. And not only that, I wanted to be part of a community where people cooperate, not one where everybody is always looking for advantage by luring other people into a trap and having power over them. To me, that was so ugly, so cruel. I couldn't possibly feel good about participating in that kind of world. Whatever practical, whatever wealth it might have offered me could not have made up for the ugliness of the world I would be joining. Where do you think the free software movement is going? I can't predict the future, I'm sorry. I used to say that my crystal ball has clouds, but then they started using cloud to describe in a confused way, a foolish way of setting up computing systems. That's why we have buttons, we have stickers that say, "There is no cloud, only other people's computers." The term cloud is so vague that it's insufficient to enable one to judge whether a setup is okay or unacceptable. It depends on the details. Basically, when you're dealing with using servers, there are various possibilities. One is you're renting the server and you decide which programs are going to run in it. Well, that's morally equivalent to buying the computer and hooking it up to the net and using it as a server. If you control what programs are running in it, you control it. But what about the other ways, the ways of doing your computing in servers that belong to others and are set up with software by others? That's different. Basically, when it's just for communicating with others, well, servers are inevitable for that. If we talk through the internet, we're going to have to be talking through other network nodes that we don't own. So it's no use wondering whether that's okay. It's the only way that could possibly be. But if you want to do your own computing, then you deserve control over that. Let's put them at the bottom. Right, that's the order they're coming in, so that way, at least it's fair. And once people started calling all of those things the cloud and blurring all these different cases together, I realized I was going to have to reject that term in order to be able to make them clear. What would you suggest to someone that would like to start an organization today? Well, that's a very general question. Organization for what? And there's so many possibilities, I wouldn't know what to say. oh, spreading free software is difficult because of big companies' competition. Well, there is free software you can promote. You can promote using gnu+linux to do your own computing on your computer. You can promote rejecting the computers that won't run it. You can promote rejecting the non-free communication systems. Those are especially pernicious because a communication system generates a network effect. The network effect simply means that the more people are using that particular system, the more pressure there is on you to use that communication system. And the very popular communication systems have generated big network effects, and most people, because they don't see any matter of principle at stake, they just surrender. And they never complain unless something very nasty gets done to them and they see it. Nasty things are getting done, but they're not aware of those. Or if once in a while the nasty thing causes personal direct inconvenience, they may complain about that, but they don't recognize that the reason that happens is that the programs are non-free. The non-free programs essentially create the temptation for the company to put malicious functionalities in. But the distance between those is so long that most users are not aware that when they accept a non-free communications program, they are inviting mistreatment. So teaching people this is important. If someone says, what is it? There's a non-free system, Discord or WhatsApp or, Zoom, whatever non-free communication system it is, they do nasty things. And they can do the nasty things because it's non-free. If it were free, somebody would make a modified version that doesn't participate in the nasty part, and thus, by making use of users' freedom and control of their own computing, the users can protect themselves and each other. So, for instance, if you're in a group of people starting an organization and somebody says, hey, let's set up a Discord channel, or let's set up a Reddit channel, subdirectory, or whatever, these things require people to run non-free software. So at that point you say, this is not a good solution because it requires people to run non-free software. And if they say they want to do it anyway, well, then you can say, well, sorry, I won't be able to participate. I was looking forward to it, but I'm not going to run that. A month ago, there was a talk near Boston given by an important progressive leader who had just published a book. So it was a book talk. And people were told, sign up through Eventbrite. And, well, I'm never going to run Eventbrite. It makes you run non-free software, and it collects data about people. You can't use it without identifying yourself, and that was going to require a payment through the website, and almost all websites except fsf.org are set up so they require people to pay by credit card or some other such digital transfer, and that means identifying yourself. Now, it's always wrong to make people identify themselves to join in an activity, and fascist governments take advantage of this. This is an assist to their repression. But it's especially bad when you do this for a talk given by a leader in the resistance to fascism. It's like, Okay, hey, everybody who's interested in resisting, identify yourself today to people who might want to arrest you. It's just dumb. How can we earn income in the framework of a global free software model? By developing software. Well, most software development is developing programs for one particular client. And they're going to have to pay for it to be written, even if it's going to be free software when it's done. Now, I have friends who are in a in a web development cooperative. They develop websites and they only use free software, and the software that they develop they hand over to the customer. But they still get paid. And nobody's going to do that kind of work without getting paid. What do you think about the open weight / open source machine learning models? Well, we're in the final stages of developing our criterion for what is a free Libero machine learning system. And what we're looking at requires publication of, or making available the training inputs as well, so you could retrain it. Because the ability to rebuild yourself differently is crucial to freedom. But it's not finished yet. How can we significantly sway the public to adopt free software when so many are happily to become tech illiterate and dismiss violations of their privacy, especially with so-called artificial, quote, intelligence, quote, feeding them confident lies? Well, it's not easy. But the first step, I think, is your own personal refusal to use those systems to talk with people. Because that way, they'll need to use a different system, a free system, to talk with you. And they'll realize that it can be done. You'll find out whether they're really your friends or not. But you'll also show people that you have the strength of will not to go along with social pressure to do something foolish. And there are a lot of bad things you'll be able to avoid that way. What's your take on piracy being used to use proprietary license on non-free software? I don't understand that last part. I mean, proprietary means non-free. But I don't know if pirates use computers very much. I believe they use guns. But the problem of piracy has been considerably reduced. It used to center around the Horn of Africa, and then they started putting armed guard teams on ships, and that pretty much sunk the pirates. Well, of course I know that when proprietary software developers talk about piracy, they mean sharing, forbidden sharing. You see, they want to stop people from sharing, but sharing is good, and stopping people from sharing is evil. It's an injustice. And that's the first reason to reject non-free software. Not only because they say, if you share this non-free software, you're a pirate. Well, that should make you want to tell them, take your non-free software and flush it down the toilet. Well, grind it up first so it won't stuff the toilet. But the point is, I don't want it. If it's going to treat me that badly, I want to get it out of my life. That's the feeling that motivates me from the beginning. With Google, well, I don't use the term open sourcing or closed sourcing because those are not, I don't advocate open source. As you saw in the video, the term open source was coined specifically not to raise the moral issues that the free software movement is about. So if you're promoting open source, you're not telling people about the free software ideas or its moral issues. Could anyone bring me another bottle of water? I'm very thirsty. So basically, it's no accident that they coined a term to do that. It was people who liked free software. In 1998, that term was coined by people who liked free software and wanted to promote development of free software, but they did not want to raise political and moral issues about software freedom. So they wanted to bury the idea of software freedom under a pile of things that don't morally question. And one of them phoned me and said, "We just came up with this new term. Will you join us in using it?" And at the moment, it wasn't obvious to me whether that was a good idea or not. So I said, "I'll have to think about it. I'll tell you tomorrow." And by the next day, it was clear to me that it would be a very bad idea for us to join in using that term. The other people would associate that term with basically an amoral approach to the situation based on convenience primarily, and that would not promote the philosophical ideas that we stood for. So I didn't. What is your take on today's cookies present in almost all sites and apps? I don't think cookies are that bad, since they're but if you turn off third-party cookies, that's good. You see, the third-party cookies can identify you in places where you don't want to be identified. But site-specific cookies are okay because they'll never really, and you can always delete them if you really use the site for many independent things. That might happen, for instance, with a search engine. You would want to get rid of the cookie between different searches. But in order for that to really work, you've got to be visiting it through Tor, so they can't tell it's the same computer. Which distribution currently running on your PC? I use Triskel, which is one of the entirely free software distributions of gnu+linux. And which would you recommend to a neophyte? I haven't tried the non-free ones. In fact, I don't try all the free ones because I've got too much work to do. So unfortunately, I can't make a recommendation about that. But the non-free, thank you. The non-free software that most GNU/Linux distributions contain generally does not make it easier to use. Oh, thanks. What is your take on a growing intellectual pressure to limit users' privacy with laws? It's vicious. We already have generally far less privacy, But what's happening is massive, pervasive surveillance, cameras in the street to identify people and then punish them, track them if they're dissidents. Of course, they always say that they're trying to stop terrorists. But you know, in Great Britain, they have labeled people who painted some airplanes as terrorists, as a terrorist organization, and now they have arrested thousands of people just for holding up signs with the name of that organization. And they are facing trial and perhaps imprisonment for years. Of course, they're not going to really imprison those people for years because the prisons are full. But the mere idea that they would equate nonviolent protest with terrorism and then use laws meant to stop terrorism to stop protests instead, that should be terrifying to everyone. How can users fight and not comply with privacy limitations imposed by governments for the sake of security? Well, first of all, teach everyone to understand that what they're defending is not really security, that real security requires running free software. And then teach that national security requires the government to insist on running free software only. Because if the government runs a non-free program developed by a company, then the government is vulnerable to that company. You may have noticed the moral panic about TikTok, which people were using in the US, and it was owned by a Japanese company and giving the Japanese company data about personal data about a lot of Americans, which indeed it could then use to persuade them and influence them, maybe to influence elections. That's a real danger. But what they ignored was that the real danger is the same regardless of what country the company that owns it exists in. American companies like the one that does Facebook and several other such things that collects enormous personal data is the same danger. They just chose to see the danger when it's coming from China and not see it when it's coming from the US. And of course, the danger is in Windows and Mac OS and Android and iOS. And all these things are collecting enormous amounts of data. And they can be used in unjust ways by the companies that collect them, and then governments can demand that data. By the way, the European Union's GDPR don't apply to data collection done in the name of, quote, security, unquote. And this is a big blind spot. What do you think is the biggest misunderstanding people have about the concept of free software? Well, a lot of people mistakenly think that it's a question of price. Free software is a matter of freedom, not price. So it's software libre, not software gratis. Once you understand that, you're on the right track. And then there are people who think that free software means software released under copyleft licenses and software released under lacks permissive, weak licenses is not free software, but rather open source. That's not true. Both kinds of licenses qualify as free software licenses. And you can find out more about that in gnu.org/philosophy/open source misses the point.html. What are your positions on piracy again? Well, you know, I saw some movie piracy. I liked the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, but I didn't like the second one because it had a parrot that was a bad guy, and I love parrots. Now, I would never accept an unauthorized copy of a non-free program, just as I would never accept an authorized copy of that same non-free program. I won't tolerate non-free software on my computer because it would give someone else power over me by giving someone else control over what my computer will do. That's the reason not to accept the unauthorized copies of non-free software. It's unjust to you. Never mind whether it's authorized or not. So, no, I don't see unauthorized redistribution of non-free software as a valid form of activism for free software. To have an activist for free software, you've got to encourage people to drop the non-free software and run free software. In a world where software is becoming a key part of the bureaucratic process of nations, should that kind of software be free as well? Well, the software that governments ask you to use to interact with government agencies, of course, must be free. Nobody should urge you to run a non-free program, and that includes the government. Of course, it's especially shocking when the government does things to pressures people to do things that surrender their human rights. But it's also true for the government agency that runs non-free software, because it is surrendering national security. It is surrendering the digital sovereignty of the state. The state has a responsibility to maintain its digital sovereignty so that it doesn't fall under the power of anyone else. But in order to do that, it has to use free software, not non-free software. The state can't control its own computing if it's doing that with software from Microsoft or Apple or Google, non-free software from anywhere. That means the government is under the power of the company that controls that program. And that's not supposed to happen. Someone is saying that in bullshit generator safety, allowing the users to get the model's weights might allow them to sabotage something. Well, users seem to be pretty good at finding ways to confuse and sabotage LLMs anyway. They keep doing it. And some people are very clever about it. So, I don't think such safety is actually possible, because what's wrong with those systems is fundamental. It's a consequence of the fact that they play with text and they don't understand what any text means. So they're enormously error prone all the time. Provoking question. Every piece of code, every software was truly free. How would computer scientists live? Well, somebody seems to think that all there are two questions, two answers to that at two levels. One is, that assumption is false. From what I've gathered, most people who were paid to write software are getting paid to write special purpose software for a particular company to use. And they might as well make it free software, and that won't affect their getting paid. So apparently this question is based on thinking only about the massively distributed programs like Windows or Android. But then we get to the point that those programs can be developed in other ways. You don't need that many people to develop those programs alone. The masses of software developers are mostly getting paid to develop special purpose programs. Now, when it comes to programs that are used by lots of people, they can form an organization and donate money to the organization to hire somebody to make an improvement in the free software. This is already done sometimes, and those people are getting paid. It doesn't happen all that often because people think that non-free software is normal. That's the way society pushes people. But these organizations can succeed very well when you have a lot of people using a free program. How do machine learning black box algorithms fit into free software? Well, I think I answered that well enough already. I hope in a few months we'll publish our criterion for free machine learning systems. What do you think about the danger of NSA or CIA infiltrating the code base of famous and widely used? Well, this person said open source. You shouldn't use open source when you're talking to me. But the danger of that infiltration is real. But the fact that the program is free and people are studying its code and looking for errors makes it more reliable against all kinds of sources of errors, including such infiltration, because people can spot the bug. You're not going to spot the bug in Windows because only a few people can look at the code of Windows, and they're all busy doing particular things. What do you think about privacy and free software? Well, non-free software is excellent for snooping on you, and generally is developed to snoop on you. So for privacy, free software is better. He says, in the artificial intelligence I suppose that means chatbots. And I can't see the connection directly. The chatbot is going to snoop for the company that runs it. It's not snooping for everybody else in general, although it may leak personal data that it has learned. What do you think of the world of the work of Edward Snowden? 3 cheers for Edward Snowden. Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Whistleblowers like Snowden help the public find out what is being done to them by their own governments. And this is essential if we want to make governments respect our freedom. It's only the first step, of course. You can't count on people to make governments change their unjust policies. But at least you can try. How to be a better computer scientist? I have no idea. I'm not exactly a computer scientist. I'm a software developer and software freedom campaigner. What is the future of free software for mobile phones? Given that vendors are locking bootloaders and device drivers are proprietary. Well, the locking of bootloaders on most of them has been the case for more than a decade. But there are exceptions, and meanwhile, we've started a project to develop, by reverse engineering, free device drivers. The corporate world advertises non-free software to non-tech savvy people, in which generally don't care about freedom and privacy and make up the majority of the population. What could be a solution to this problem? Well, the 2 solutions I know of are, first of all, explain these issues to other people, whether it's people you know or in a talk like this one, invite other people to watch this talk. You can also it's a matter of refusing to participate in using the non-free software, just saying, you'll have to count me out as long as you're using that, Discord or Reddit or WhatsApp or Facebook. I'm not going to be there. And sometimes you'll just have to go away, and sometimes you'll be able to convince a group of people to communicate on some other kind of platform that doesn't do this bad thing. What do you think about free software applied to hardware? Well, the question didn't say free software, but I won't use that term. In detail, the acquisition of Arduino by Qualcomm could be dangerous. Well, it could be, but I don't know a lot about either one. I do know that the Arduino can be used without non-free software, which is a good thing. There are other small computers that can't be. For instance, the Strawberry Pi. You need non-free software to boot it at all. It's a shame. Now, but in terms of how does this apply to this idea of freedom apply to hardware designs? Look at gnu.org/philosophy/freehardwaredesigns.html. When I thought about this area, I realized it's a mistake to ask, is this particular physical object free? Because that criterion makes sense when applied to a work, something that can be copied and modified. It doesn't make sense directly when applied to a physical object like a computer. It does make sense when applied to the design of a part of the computer. That can be free or not. In fact, that always is either free or not. So really we should be asking the question, is this particular hardware design free? Now, in one piece of hardware, you may find many different levels of design about different parts. For instance, if it's electronic, there's probably a circuit board, that's one design, and inside each chip there is another design, and those are all separate issues. You know, one chip may have a free design, another chip may not, then the circuit board may have a free design or not. So if you try to lump them all together and ask, is this whole mishmash of designs free? That obstructs clear thinking. If you look at each design separately and ask, is this design free? Then you get clear answers. Now, you may find out that these 2 designs are free and those 5 are not free. It's more complicated that way, but that complexity corresponds to reality. Recently, we've seen an increase in governments approving digital IDs and chat controls with the noble idea of protecting kids. As you mentioned in the talk of 2014 in Geneva, we also need freedom on the net. Well, I condemn requirements to identify yourself for a digital service or digital access to something. Now, when it's a question of doing something that inherently requires identifying yourself, like, for instance, paying your taxes or exercising some rights, you may need to, if the rights have to do with real-world physical actions, you may need to identify yourself. I'm not against the idea of governments having some records about people, but digital ID is something that you have to be very careful about, because the danger is that it will require people or organizations to run non-free software. That's not necessary. There are ways to do it that avoid that problem, but governments don't seem to care about avoiding it. We have to demand that they do. Basically, government websites should allow you to do what you're doing without running any non-free software. Several years ago, when COVID was rampant, I wanted to, I had to enter the UK, maybe just for transfer in the airport, and you had to use a website to ask for permission. I was amazed, but it worked fine for me with my browser that won't execute non-free JavaScript. Now the UK has set up a system where you have to get permission to even transit between airplanes there. And it's based entirely on non-free JavaScript, and you have to make a payment, which is made digitally, and you need not to run non-free JavaScript to make the payment. I'll never be able to use that website, so the only way I can go to the UK is if somebody else uses the website for me, typically the organization that is inviting me and buying the tickets and so on. But that's a gratuitous problem. It didn't have to happen. They could have avoided that easily. And it's the government's duty to allow people to pay cash. What do you think about chat control? I answered. Protect ourselves in the world situation, how could we protect ourselves from chat control? Well, chat control would, as I understand it, apply to devices that are basically fixed rigidly and are sold with certain capabilities. Like if it's sold with encryption capability, it will have to snoop on people before encryption. But it doesn't propose to prohibit installing free software. So if you get one of the mostly free versions of Android and install a free encryption program, chat control, as far as I know, won't apply to it at all. And that's because the requirement is placed on the manufacturer of the device. If it's sold without GPG installed, well, then it's not violating anything. If you install GPG, the GNU Privacy Guard, yourself, then the manufacturer can't be blamed. I actively try to use as much free software as possible and actively advocate for it. This, of course, can be quite hard and sometimes impossible. Yeah, there's no guaranteed way to convince everybody. Maybe one simply must accept that if you keep trying, you'll succeed sometimes, and you'll fail a lot of times to convince people, but that doesn't mean that's not a disaster. It just means you can't win them all. So keep trying, and you'll make some progress. Do you feel that it's currently feasible to avoid proprietary software completely? Yes, I do. How close are we to a free software reality? You mean a world where there's no proprietary software anymore? That's the ultimate goal. We're not very close to it. We have a long way to go. So get started. Does pattern recognition qualify as software to be called AI? Sometimes yes. In particular, there's a kind of machine learning where you train it with lots of inputs, and for each input you give it an answer of how to classify it, and eventually it trains the neural network to find a way to recognize the things that should be yes and versus the things that should be no. And some of those work as well as humans in their specific areas. So I think that does qualify as intelligence. Research is led by big companies and universities who voluntarily hinder reproducibility yet claim freedom. I don't know what that means by what claim freedom concretely means in this. How could we give voice to the small researchers who truly distribute their work without sales bullshit? I don't know. That's outside of my own work, and I just don't know how. What are your thoughts on Google's recent policy of change announcements which prohibit, this is restricting Android app stores, and this is what F-Droid has condemned and is fighting against. And the Free Software Foundation is working with F-Droid on this. We're on the same side, the free software side. What do you think about recent anti-freedom movements made by the giant tech companies in the name of bullshit generators. Well, I'd say it's a marketing hype campaign. It's not a political type movement that I see. Maybe tomorrow the EU Parliament will vote on chat control. My understanding is it's blocked by several countries in the EU. That's what people were telling me last week. But I am not an expert on chat control itself or EU politics. Basically, though, I think you need to be active with your own government and with your MEPs if you want to influence what the EU will do on this or any other issue. I'm worried about Meta's monopoly over Western social media. Well, I'm worried about what it can do to influence others, but I know how to stop it from influencing me. I have never connected to Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApps or anything that they do, because they're all obviously nasty. So if there's information I might conceivably be able to get off of Facebook, I know that A, it would mean running non-free software, and B, it would mean spending hours looking at the things it wants to show me before I could see the thing I actually wanted to look at. And that's just too much trouble. If you had now a child, how would you there's a word I can't read, something passion for computing and freedom, and how would you teach to preserve those same values in today's world? Well, using marketing terms, which I don't agree with. But this is a big issue, because when my child starts to go to school, the school would surely demand that the student run non-free software, and perhaps demand that the student bring to school a computer with non-free software, which would not happen because I would never tolerate that in my home. I wouldn't tolerate my kids being addicted to unjust software. And then they would, or maybe they would lend the kid a computer with non-free software, and I would say, that's not coming into this house. And they might demand I sign a contract about obeying the license on non-free software, and I would say, in the 1980s, I vowed I would never agree to anything like this, and I never have, and I won't start now. And this would lead to an interesting confrontation, and I don't know what would happen, but I would not back down. Okay, I'm going to save that, though. Maybe it's... but how about if you send me an email, the person who wrote this? You said earlier that ChatGPT is bullshit generator. What is for you the correct meaning of computer
understanding? Well, when I use that term understand or know, I don't have a specific meaning in mind for computers or programs. It's the same that it means for a person to understand something or not. It is to take cognizance of the implications of the fact so that you can draw appropriate conclusions from it. And it's pretty obvious that chatbots today don't have anything like understanding of the words that they are generating. So these two questions will have to be the last, I'm sorry. The era of indifference and media illiteracy, it seems really hard to convey the importance of free software without ending up being treated as some sort of something spirationist. How should we overcome this wall of hostility? Well, using drastic examples of unjust software can be a good start. I mean, there are many examples of nastiness by software developers and nastiness by server developers that will make anybody angry. Like when it won't let you unsubscribe. It just keeps making you say, yes, I really want to unsubscribe for the 15th time. Yes, I really want to. Oh, you're asking me again for the 16th time. Yes, I want to unsubscribe. Yes, I really mean it. This is known as a dark pattern. They're very common. Look up dark patterns. You'll find lots of examples. But here's another. There is a company that develops software to keep patient records in medical clinics and hospitals, and it's used in lots of them in the US and outside the US too. It's called Epic. And recently in the US, they added something to the site's terms and conditions. Now, their terms and conditions have a rather frequently encountered clause. They can change the terms and conditions at any time, and if you use the site again, you have accepted the new terms, even if you never read them. Now, this ought to be illegal. It's obviously for suckers, and I never agree to any terms or conditions which say that. I couldn't use the site anyway. It sends non-free software, which I won't run. So when I looked at the terms and conditions, I knew I would not make an account on that site. But I wanted to see if it was doing anything else bad. And I found that you agree to be a sucker clause. But recently, it took advantage of that. It made all the users agree that they would never sue the company for mishandling personal data. Now, this is exploitative, and I think a lot of people will understand it. But what conclusion can you draw from the fact that this company, which millions of people deal with, took advantage of them by imposing a change in terms? That will help them to see that these companies are in a position to mistreat people, and they do so. And then look at Google with this change in App Store policies. They keep doing this. So at this point, it's time to finish because I want to auction a book and a GNU. This is an adorable GNU that needs a home. So I'm going to auction it for the benefit of the Free Software Foundation. But I can't do it here. It's forbidden inside the university. So we're going to have to go out. In a few minutes, I will go out and lead you to the place where we're going to do the auction. And we're also going to sell small pieces of merchandise, again, for the benefit of the Free Software Foundation. The Free Software Foundation has staff, and we need to pay them, and this is part of how we raise funds. You can also donate to the Free Software Foundation, and you can also join the Free Software Foundation, and that will support our work. That's part of one answer to the question of how you can help support free software in the world. So I'll be going out that way, and I'll go down the elevator because I have arthritis in my knees. But most of you, I think, can go down the stairs and we'll get to the same place.
Grazie a tutti.